One and live. Oh, I'm really happy about this chat because I'm so in need to have suggestions and strategy as an entrepreneur in this tough situation. Howard, how are you?
I'm great. Great to be here, Marco. Thank you for having me.
So it's really a tough period, this one, and every time I talk with someone, I mean, the theory looks so easy, and the facts are so hard, because then you have to, if you are an entrepreneur, you have to take decisions, and it's a very difficult period. So start with a little picture of the situation. What's the situation at the moment, and what's your point of view on the situation that we're living?
Yeah. Right now, there is the good news as well as the murky news. The better news is across Europe as well as the United States, we are seeing a gradual reopening of the economy. Switzerland, for instance, before I flew out and came to Hong Kong momentarily to be with my mother, Switzerland now is beginning to see business returning, particularly for small shops, supermarket, essential, and then school beginning to open. And unless we have a major second wave of resurgence of new infection, chances is we could slowly getting back to substantial amount or portion of the economy back into action. So that's good news for everybody. Government have a relief, even for our own well-being, right? Locking in the house and not able to work, that certainly destroy our sense of identity. So that's the good news. But there's, of course, also the murky news as well.
Right. Go with the bad news.
The bad news is, I think we are, until that we really see this vaccination is proven and being deployed at scale around the world. You're looking at Asia, this kind of tells you what our near future may look like. Singapore open up a little bit, then they need to close down because there are basically this cluster of outbreak because of migrant or foreign workers. Hong Kong, we have pretty much controlled the situation relatively well until, again, there are foreign residents coming back to Hong Kong, and we see a rise of 11 new cases and require complete quarantine. So the murky or the not so good news is the kind of global travel in making deals. You meet with your customer, holding a town hall with your salespeople flying across different parts of the world. Even when you're small businesses, for instance, of getting your customer around the world together for a strategizing, big town hall meeting. Those type of on-premise event probably would still need to be postponed sort of indefinitely yet. So that's the worst news. But hey, we are all flexible. So this is the importance of adaptation, of changing the work habit, thinking about new trend.
Absolutely, absolutely. I titled our video. I never know how to title, a video. It's always so difficult because I think that I'm gonna talk about a topic and then I get curious about something else, and then we talk about completely different topics. But I titled like that: how your business can transform, with Professor Howard Hughes. Yeah, and it is. I think. Do you agree on the fact that it's not about only? The problem is not only for small businesses. I mean, we see Disney. I saw that you were analyzing also Disney business model recently, and some companies that I believe they were untouchable, the untouchables, like the movie, and Disney was the untouchable with incredible movies, theme park. How can they ever have problem? And they have, because they don't have, theme park access and movies, they cannot come out, or they don't want to launch them because otherwise they would lose a lot of money. So it's crazy. Tell us about this, the situation of also the big companies like Disney, for instance.
Right. I mean, at IMD Business School, we basically work with a lot of executives thinking about how to navigate the future. And Disney, just like what you pointed out, it used to be, until most recently, is really the poster child for large-scale transformation, right? they did a number of critical steps over the last 5 years to fundamentally try to gear up and prepare for a future that is pretty much on the wall. So what they did is, for instance, in the theme park from Orlando to Florida, they put on this magic wristband that essentially is sort of a tracking device, if you will, to make sure the customer experience is always top notch. They know exactly what you have pre-ordered, and by the time you arrive to kiosk or restaurant, the serving members would get an alert and getting ready for the kind of order you have prepared. They acquire a number of franchises, right? Marvel and all these major character, Pixar. These acquisitions really strengthen their core business. But the most interesting thing is they stop distributing their content over to Netflix, right? That takes guts for CEO to do so, and begins to pour in money to Disney Plus. So until most recently, it is being hailed as the poster child of how visionary leadership can act out and should act out on the ground, until right now, COVID, right? Because for any organization, it's not just about painting the picture for the future, but it's also making sure you can deliver today. That's the brutality of the way we structure our financial market. So Disney is not an exception. So when you have your theme park being shut down, when all your cruise line is no longer around, even musical on Broadway and West End is not even allowed. Never mind about the retail store selling the soft toys. All these are putting on hold. Then, of course, Disney is taking a big hit. And we see that rolling out not just in terms of the share price, but they were issuing bonds, raising funds, and preserving cash at the time when the CEO is stepping down to become the chairman of the group as well. So it is sort of unfortunate timing under all these. And I think the big lesson here is, if Disney is also taking a hit out of this, there are a lot of companies even more vulnerable than Disney. And government really needs to think hard on one side, and also for companies and executive, if time is still on your side, we have to accelerate the transformation. This COVID thing simply accelerate a number of key trends. We've seen it coming. It simply put them on turbocharge.
Yeah, I see the market in Italy. I'm Italian, so I obviously Italy is very close to my mind and my heart. And the crazy thing is that, for instance, in Italy, for the last 20 years, we've been talking about digital transformation and the importance of the tech sector and social media marketing. But companies they were really not taking it seriously. In the majority of the companies, I would say, they don't even sell online. So now with the COVID, there was a huge acceleration, and so that's maybe the only positive impact that they had. But for me, the lesson is that you never know. Even if you Disney, even I heard, do you know Dana White, the president of MMA, the fighting organization? All right,
That's right.
and they are a billion-dollar companies. I mean, they big, healthy business, and they didn't know what to do, and because you can't do matches anymore. Now they started again. So I think it's crazy, the idea that you have to be entrepreneurial, but you don't know what can happen tomorrow morning. So it's a bit crazy. What do you suggest to do in this scenario?
Yeah, so in the past, in my world, across business school and executive education, we pretty much tell executive at maximum you do scenario planning, right? Basically, you come up with all this contingency plan, a 2x2 matrix, and what you want to do is to come up with a plan that basically target a scenario where the consequences is the highest, as well as the likelihood of happening would be the highest. Long and behold, there is black swan event, right? So COVID, in a way, is sort of the unthinkable, because if you roll back in time, even in February, when Wuhan was locked down, there is some kind of comfort among the Western world thinking this would be just a Chinese-only crisis. Yeah. It would be somewhere in the East, maximum Southeast Asia, perhaps, and business as usual. This is why we carry out business as usual until it's no longer viable. And what's really interesting is also even inside Facebook, Facebook have no contingency plan. They have contingency plan for earthquake because California is known for that.
Yeah.
So they actually have drill to face earthquake, but not for corona crisis. So I think the key lesson learned today here is, given the complexity of our world, I'm talking about not just the global economics, the geopolitics, but it's also the natural environment and also the shift of consumer changes in behavior. The sort of long-range planning that executive feels very comfortable about, and building this like almost decision tree, very highly complex, to basically have this perfect plan to face a scenario is almost a waste of time.
Yeah.
What you want is to build infrastructure that allow flexibility on the fly. Now, this is a fundamental shift of mentality because it basically ripped away of everything most companies are built at the point over the last 3-4 decades. It's about complex efficiency. Once it fixed, it's a monument. What we're talking about here is forget about all that. You just incur a lot of vulnerability going forward. What you need is to build up basic infrastructure that allows you to scale anytime at anywhere. And it requires a fundamental mind shift among rank and file to embrace this flexibility and agility. And we could go into detail about a couple of examples as well. But it is totally, I agree with you. It requires also the role of the business school to change the way we educate and push management thinking going forward.
The crazy thing, Howard, is that I don't say I was ready as an entrepreneur to pandemic, but yeah, I mean, I was ready to the worst scenario, but I was not ready for the worst measures. So I was not ready for a global lockdown. I was ready for a pandemic coming and disrupting a business. All right, that's one of the problems you can have along decades of entrepreneurship. But I was not ready that you are just in lockdown for 3 months. Here in UK now they are releasing now a bit. But that took me really out of my position. So I had to readjust and transform. Do you see any company in this moment that are really, really transforming in the right direction? I mean, of course, Amazon and these companies are going very well, but companies that are not digital native, digital DNA in their heart.
Yeah, I mean, no one is prepared for Corona. Simply no one, except the few traders who underwrite Corona bonds, right?
Right.
They kind of know what is coming. But no one really prepared for such pandemic. But what you see is there are organizations, and there are the brick and mortar store I'm talking about, in fact, are thriving during this period of time. Not because of foresight, because it's impossible, but simply they are much more resilient and rapid to pivot. I'll give you a concrete example. So when coronavirus outbreak really hits China big time, you can imagine all these medium-sized apparel brand would die, just much like J.Crew and JCPenney, or they are all lining up for bankruptcy. So there are a couple of interesting brand. In fact, they have pivoted their business model literally overnight. And that is how they re-emerge stronger than ever. One guy is called Peace Bird, and they have all these brick and mortar store across China. They're selling apparel for menswear. And literally overnight, the CEO basically drove an immediate flip from sales associate in the store, and now there's no store. You all gonna do live streaming. So all these sales associate becomes YouTube star, if you will, but this is on, WeChat, Taobao, all these live stream platform. There's another company called In Time. It's a jeweler. They do similar thing, but they go even one step further. Immediately, they derive a corporate curriculum to teach the associate how to become more effective live streamers. They also call some of these key opinion leaders who have like enormous fan base to demonstrate how to do live stream in a more compelling way. And they make that curriculum basically open to all the associates across the company. No question asked. If you're interested, do it now. Some of the associates really find out from a productivity angle, in the past, they kind of need to stay in the same store for 3 days to push for X amount of volume. On the live stream, just for 3 hours, reach the same volume already. Of course, that's the power of e-commerce, but it's a combination of unleashing that entrepreneurial, almost animal spirit among your rank and files, as well as the commitment from the very top, right? There is no discussion, oh, are they going to tarnish our brand? Are they good enough? Do they represent our brand sufficiently? Do we have the right script? No such talk anymore. Let's do it all full speed. Something works out, some things may not work out, and it's okay in crisis. There's very little to lose. The last thing you want to do is inaction. And this is the beauty. Whenever something happens and works out, they publicize internally in order to scale. So that's how organization can maximize their chance to survival rather than just waiting on the side and complain and bemoan and do nothing.
You always have an interesting eye on Asian economy and Asian situation. What do you think that will happen after this COVID? I mean, do you think China will go faster than before because they've been there with the COVID before, so they came out earlier than US? Do you expect more collaboration with US? Do you expect more competition? What's your point of view on that?
No, there will be way more competition. And this is getting to the core of what we're seeing as the battle for, you could say, like technological supremacy all the way to the largest economy in the world. The whole idea that countries are going to collaborate has come to an end, which is very unfortunate because the fundamental foundation of modern economy is based on comparative advantage. You don't try to do everything under your country border. You specialize on what you do best. This is how we alleviate hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, not just in China, but also India, Bangladesh, South Asia, and Africa as well, all over the world. But as things evolve, that is not even a position that are acceptable by most politicians around the world. So I think the latest discussion from US retreating from WHO all the way to a strengthening on the crackdown on Huawei, for instance, that basically describe going forward, we most likely to have two orbit of economic system. One would be centralized and circulated around the Western economy, although it may not be US leading the role as strong as in the past anymore because its interest is really putting America first. So it would be, generally speaking, would be Western economy, if you will. And then you have the other emerging or fast-growing region, particularly in Southeast Asia, for instance, would inevitably getting drift towards the orbit of China. And that has already been reflected in the trade volume because China's longest trading partner, of course, is in the US. But the volume in the latest quarter already surpassed by Southeast Asia. So it's already happening. That sort of bipolar world is emerging. I think for huge implication for everyone, right? Whether you're interested in politics or you're simply a business person trying to, make a living out of the global market, it has huge implication. And you think about TSMC in Taiwan, right? So they are selling chips. They're taking order from Huawei. And now US telling them you cannot sell your product to Huawei. And what do? Like Huawei is 20% of your revenue. So, it's all of a sudden politics and business are becoming intertwined, which of course would introduce a lot of market distortion. Fundamentally, when you introduce politics into this, you destroy efficiency. That's what is going to happen.
Wow, it's a crazy moment, but obviously all the time, if you scroll the Twitter feed, you always find the quote that say, greatest companies started during recession, during crazy crisis. And you say, yeah, it's right. But when you are in the middle of it, you don't really feel fantastically optimistic. You obviously have to execute and operate, but it's it's a very unstable moment, and I think everyone are trying to understand how to adjust. By the way, about the live streaming, it's very interesting your point. China got so many companies, small companies, agriculture, people working in fields, live streaming their corn. I mean, that was crazy. So live streaming gonna be huge. What do you think about companies like Netflix, for instance, that in September, obviously now they have subscribers growth, which is obvious because we were binge watching all the time. I don't know if you. What's your favorite series? What's your favorite series?
Well, so I was trying to catch up with a lot of series. So my latest one, which I just finished, is Westworld, which I should have completed a long time ago already. So that's kind of funny. Like we're all like trying to catch up with all the series coming along.
Yeah, I'm trying to catch up on Narcos. I mean, I never watched it, and I find it incredible. I'm still on episode 5, so don't tell me anything about Pablo Escobar. No, but let's take, for instance, Netflix. What do you think will happen on September, October, when they didn't produce originals in this month? They couldn't. So what will happen? That will end up with the Netflix that for 2 months we'll have no new originals or no new movies, and so they will have churn happening. What's your prediction?
Right. So I think in the entertainment industry, in fact, Netflix probably is the most secure one. Because if you think for a moment, Netflix logic, yes, before they getting into the whole content production, in the past, the business logic is always about matchmaking. They know what you like and give you this obscure indie movie that you turns out to love it so much. And that's in fact the fundamental core of their businesses. They need to get into content production in order to really drive the subscription volume, because their competitors are busy building up content as well. So like Amazon Prime, as well as, of course, Disney Plus as well. And if you compare with Disney, this is really interesting why I said Netflix probably is in the best position out of the worst scenario. Because for Disney, for instance, it's always been a hit maker. They need to create big hit, not just selling on movie box office, but all this spin-off from theme park and cruise line, musical, toys, and things like that. If you're looking at Disney revenue breakdown, it's really half of it is content, half of it is all this like spillover business, I would call. Versus Netflix is only one, right? Its subscription model is purely matchmaking. And for the library that they have is the biggest in the world. I mean, even if there is no major big hit, they could still probably retain those subscribers. Where do you go, right? Because in the end, competition is about you being better than your competitor. I hate to say this, but there is also this reality as well. From that angle, like if you don't use Netflix, where do you go? There's nothing else. And where Netflix probably they are now with all these people watching, they're refining their algorithm even better, so that the movie they used not to recommend, they could now recommend and be very certain that you actually like it. Again, these algo is the more data they consume, the better prediction it becomes. And right now they're just having a boom in terms of data trove that you can imagine over the last few months.
I've been very disappointed, Howard, yesterday by Netflix algo, because they suggest me a movie called, what's the name, Polar, and it's the story of a killer that want to retire, but he works for a killer association that don't want to pay his pension, so they try to kill him. So they try to kill the killer. And it was so bad. I mean, so bad. But usually they have a great matchmaking algorithm. But yesterday, yes, they failed miserably.
They're probably now tweaking the algo because of your feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. They will change it now. Reed Hastings will change it. Tell me about e-learning and, I mean, business school, for instance. Your experience as a online remote professor in this period. I saw some teachers very good using online, video. Other teachers that are very good, very knowledgeable, but they were horrible on camera. They didn't know how to use technology. So how do you see that war changing?
Right. So I need to be careful. Hopefully this web camera is not going to break down when I'm presenting this idea.
Or my camera, of course.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So, it's not just business school, but is higher education in general. I think the implication is higher education, university in general. So if you think about this online teaching, what we're facing, the seismic shift is for professors like me across the world, is we are moving away from a theater setting, like Broadway show, into Hollywood on film. There is an idea that every time there's innovation coming along, there are two types, right? There is one that is enhancing your core competencies. So think about, when there's in a theater, there's all this wiring and automation. It augments an actor to be more effective on stage. So that's competency enhancing innovation. There's the other type, essentially destroying your core competencies, such as digital photography did to Kodak. And so right now, I think for higher education in general, the thing around remote learning is pretty much competency destroying type of innovation. Because if you are thinking about Harvard Business School, for instance, or IMD when we teach, the star historically are the one who can persuade people through real life interaction. This big star can read the audience real time and course correct real time to sway and get that emotional attachment. Moving online, for one thing, I cannot read 90 students in front of the camera. Even if I could, I don't get a lot of the body signal and things like that. But what it provided us is the ability to reach a larger audience. So I think and there are people who told me from a student evaluation, what you see is the big star, their performance once you move online versus the bottom of the heap, they basically get narrowed. So now it's really the typical situation. Innovation allows a lot of variation. This is why you see all schools are doing all sort of experimentation. All professors are doing all sort of experimentation. But the standard have not emerged yet. But I would hypothesize once that standard emerge, there would be much smaller cohort of professor would become highly relevant in the future. It's the sort of same story we've seen in other industry.
Do you expect that e-learning, let's say, is here to stay, and universities will start to have, a stable e-learning way, or you can attend the Harvard or Stanford or the biggest university in the world, Cambridge, Oxford, online, remotely and not remotely in the same way, or there will go back to the normal situation?
Right. So one thing is, depending on how long this pandemic is going to last, the longer it lasts, the more irreversible the trend. But, fundamentally, we've got to look at the economic equation. If you're looking at the cost of tuition, particularly in the United States, it's rising faster than healthcare. Faster than healthcare. Wow. And healthcare doesn't have a good reputation for cost efficiency, right? In the United States. And so, where do this money goes? Well, it goes to sports stadium, the alumni hangout, the student center. Why do they need to do that? And by the way, if you go to United States, every college town looks beautiful, right? There's no slum town with a college. They all look pretty. And why is that? The international student always pay for full tuition. And if you follow the crumb, if you will, you follow the trend. One is the idea that international student would be much more restricted, both from a virus crisis, as well as the harder and harder for students to get US visa as well because of the administration policy. You put these two together, plus the rising cost of tuition and the student debt, and the lethargy of the job market, I just don't see the number of applicants will continue to stay going forward. So a lot of the medium-sized university, which doesn't have a big endowment, would struggle mightily going forward. So that's just the brutality of number one. Now, then what is the future mode? Well, I don't think MOOC is going to stay the way it is. Quite frankly, the current mode of delivery is not really effective yet. But just like any disruptive technologies, right? They're going to improve. So I see going forward, there are a couple of things could happen. One is the revenue model. If students are not going to go to the US, doesn't mean that they don't want to learn, how to build an autonomous driving from a Stanford professor, right? So that distant learning is still very attractive, particularly if I get to choose, if the society begins to recognize or employer begins to recognize the credit through distant learning, and which they will, because once we accept Zoom is for board meeting, why don't you accept learning can be done online? And once employer begins to recognize in a big way this online degree is just as good as offline, or an online degree from the top tier business school or top tier engineering school or law school could even be better than a mediocre one that kind of getting stuck in the middle, then we're gonna see a seismic shift in the landscape. It's all demand driven, the way I see it.
Got it. Howard, I started to be distracted by the first and top three behind you. I wonder what, because every time I speak with someone from Asia, like Asian, I was a table tennis player. So for me, it was like first in table tennis championship there since what is that first and top three?
No, this is funny because the video camera kind of crop it, and it's the latest. In fact, this is a little outdated because it just came out 2020. So it's by the ranking from the Financial Times in ranking the open exec ed program of my school, IMD. So every year they kind of do ranking like this in looking at so what makes executive achieving their learning objective, etc., etc. So our marketing team is so thrilled that we are able to, sustain another year of top number one position. So I was like,
no table tennis, ranking
or violin lesson.
By the way, in the chat, Stefano say, Howard was my Electrolux leadership course coordinator for 2 weeks. He is one of the best I've ever met. Wow. What did you do at Electrolux?
So we have 2 types of program at IMD. One is the open program, like the one you just see at the back. So essentially, we run executive education. Anybody can subscribe and come. So I direct a program called Advanced Management Program, AMP. Right. So that's the other one we call custom program. Essentially, we work with a company. We work together and define the learning objective. And then the company will send a cohort of senior executive to IMD, and we spend maybe a week. Over the course of 6 months, we meet again later, and there are projects in between, trying to figure out and generate a shared viewpoint so that, as you said earlier, transformation cannot just be one leader at the top and shout, right? You kind of need everyone to have buy-in. So that's the sort of open program, and Stefano is one of my early participants. So it's great to see, oh my God, what a small world. Can you believe that?
For me, it's incredible. Every time I have a guest and the guest give a story, or there is someone in my community that say, yeah, I was there. I got a guest who was with Michael Jordan at a very early event in Italy. And then one guy in the chat say, yeah, remember, I was the official photographer there. All the time there is this kind of, it's a small world.
It must be so interesting for you to talk to all these leaders, celebrity, and just making global connection. My God,
it's really cool. It's really cool. It's a bit frustrating because I always feel so ignorant. So when I hear people like you talking, I think, oh my gosh, I don't know anything about like everything. So I try always to improve. It's my master. It's basically my executive business course. This one for me.
So do not estimate you are playing the connector role, right? Because
Right.
Malcolm Gladwell would suggest, yeah, you can have Maverick who deliver great content, but in the end, to make it happen is because of connector like you to spread the message across.
I'm the connector. All right, I'll try to put myself in this new role. So wait. Not Solak. He is asking, would the university reduce their tuition fees? No, that's the answer. No, I'm joking, but at least not the Italian private universities.
No, I think what will happen, you're going to see a lot of interesting model being experimented. And here are a couple of things I've been seeing off the ground already. So one is, once you move to online and people begins to accept this as a mode of delivery, of course, it needs to have a lot more improvement, right? Because I think people are suffering Zoom fatigue, honestly. Like you're staring at Zoom 8 hours a day. The last thing you want is to go home to have another Zoom session. My God. So I think the mode of delivery will get improved, but give it some patience. Don't rush it. I mean, you think about television, right? When television first came along, TV news anchor essentially, and all the TV program, there's no other TV program doesn't look like this. They basically print out the script as if they were reading from radio, and they just do the screenshot around the clock. All the show looks like this. It's much later than people figure out. You can do drama series on TV. You can do props and things like that. So I think we are still so early to move learning on a distance. And so we should be prepared to see a lot of product innovation, whether it's VR and AR, and oh my God, sky is literally the limit once 5G is around. So that immersiveness that we all human would be craving for on both sides, whether it's for instructor as well as student, will come for sure. Now, but then that's only part of the equation. I think the other things that, such as Nat just mentioned, well, university may not lower the price, but you can see new deals coming up. For instance, I've seen already startup thinking about, okay, instead of charging people tuition, why don't students only pay us upon graduation when they find a job and pay for a percentage of their income? I thought that's really interesting because that's the logic of pay for outcome, right?
Yeah.
At a business school,
who was it? Sorry, excuse me to interrupt, Howard. Who was the Lambda? Maybe a company like that they try to introduce this model.
Yeah, both in the US and Europe as well. And because in healthcare you see people talk about pay for outcome. In even heavy machineries, right? You're looking at GE and John Deere and many ABB, our client. They're all moving into selling outcome, not selling the machine. And that's just a logical evolution for higher education. You don't pay for service, but you pay for outcome, meaning helping me to get a job to have a good income. And that also resolved the whole issue of student debt as well. Now, for in-residence, probably you cannot do that. But for online learning, university can do so because once you move things to online, it's always the zero marginal cost. For an additional student coming along, the cost of production for one additional student is pretty much negligible compared to a face-to-face in residence. So I think from both business model innovation, that would yield substantial savings for students going forward.
Got it. Here we are. We have Rosella Meo. Dear professor, I've just finished my MBA in Sustainability Management at another business school in Switzerland. Do you have any suggestion about searching for a job? Well, it's a great period, this one, Rosella, to search for a job. No, I'm joking. I mean, there are industries that are recruiting like crazy. So it depends where you are.
Yeah. So the good news about, this, the silver lining, I should say, from the COVID-19 for people on the job market is it's not hitting people universally hard. There are industry pretty much escape unscarred. The healthcare industry, and there are industry actually see surge in demand. But I think it's also, by focusing on sustainability these days, is actually have a much stronger and broadening appeal. Because for a long time, even 18 months ago, when people talk about sustainability, it's not really for real. It's like going back to earlier, Marco, you said, it's like kind of window dressing. People call it CSR. Most of these are, foundation work and on the side. But what we're seeing is there's a big push from consumer all the way to society. We want to not just held accountable for company strategy, but we want to see that business operation and their strategy actually use sustainability to drive growth, right? So whether it's Patagonia, whether it's Unilever, these are prime examples in the past. But I think the idea of building sustainability to become core purpose of the firm going forward would become even more and more pronounced. From my work, when I discuss with CEOs around the world, they all recognize that because the shift, for instance, no plastic straw, happened almost literally overnight. So again, it comes down to, building up the capability to prepare for the future. So I think, our listeners in a good position. Just go deeper in terms of the vertical. Don't pick one. Don't get yourself locked into one vertical too strongly. Think about sustainability as a general capability like accounting that you can deploy across vertical. And because this is a round that are relatively new, you need to stay open-minded so that you don't say, like, oh, this is not for me, but just go in and explore. And I think that is the modus operandi right now.
There are also so many new sectors. Did you watch on Saturday the SpaceX launch?
Oh my God. Isn't that interesting? Space tech is another thing. My God.
Incredible.
Now, that may be the only industry where East and West would continue to collaborate.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
But space economy, for instance, is really, really interesting. There will be so many new projects, activities, skills required, new products, new ventures. So, I mean, I'm very optimistic when I see at the market and I try to redirect my attention to where the market is going, where the market is growing. Obviously, there are sectors that are hit deeply, but you have to keep reinventing. And by the way, about a very problematic sector, Howard, a couple of questions more, and then I'll let you go, by the way. Francesco is asking, what does Mr. Yu think about the future of travel industry?
Oh, God.
Are Airbnb and sharing economy at the final point? Obviously, traveling and hospitality, they have been hit very hard. I have to say, I just give you this feedback, and then I'm curious about your opinion. I went yesterday here on Brighton. I live in UK in Brighton. I went on the beach, and it was like great. It was so packed. It was like August, but really, really, really packed. And I thought, wow, social distancing didn't last long. But so I think will be very fast, the reopening, and probably infrastructures are not built to have social distance embedded in the hospitality industry, or I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think there is the hospitality industry or travel industry in general cater for leisure, and there are the travel industry cater for businesses. So I think the businesses may not come back.
Right.
Primarily because a lot of productivity tool being deployed and save a lot of companies money. Once the budget is gone, it's hard to get it back. So because once you give it back to shareholders, it's very hard to make a case. But for leisure, it's tapping into something quite fundamental as human being. We in the end, we still need experience. This is how we learn, and this is how it hardwired in the way through millennial. So yeah. Right now, it's basically government policy. You are not allowed to go. And the moment you have this reopening, people couldn't wait, right? Despite the risk. Like, seriously, like if we are rational being, we won't. But human is not rational. So I think unless touch wood that we will never have vaccine, but it doesn't look like it. And there seems to be enough candidate. Although there's always a fear that we may not even get a vaccine in the end. And then Corona is going to linger for a long, long time. Unless we are really moving into that most worst scenario. Otherwise, I think travel for leisure will return. Although, in terms of the absolute amount, because the business travel may decline, and I don't think they will come back. as forcefully as it used to be, then the whole travel industry in terms of absolute volume may drop quite significantly. But doesn't mean that the experiential economy is done. People still want experience. You still want immersive, kind of lifestyle. It's just that maybe before people sign up the final tech, there are all this digital mode has been improved so much because of COVID. People are gonna do that before they finally board a ship or something like that.
That's interesting. I like the idea that maybe the market contract reduce, but you still want to do experiences. Experiential economy is not the same as travel economy.
I think so. Yeah, but if you Airbnb probably is okay because it's really experiential. But Hilton and Marriott for business traveler, I'm not too sure.
And what about airlines? I mean, I imagine that you travel a lot pre-COVID, doing a lot of pitches, lessons, and go there, go here, consulting. How do you think will change? Also, I was thinking the low-cost companies. I mean, a low-cost company thrived because of a low cost. But if traveling become more expensive because you need less, I don't know, seats on a plane, more costs to sanitize the plane and everything, maybe it's changing the way we travel. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if you look at the airline industry before COVID, it has been on the rise in terms of volume travel, right? And ticket price keep on coming down, although the experience wasn't that good because people keep on complaining in terms of the service quality. But in the end, it's like the economy don't just run by itself. At some point, I think the society has to come to terms. Is this a sector we want to grow them, almost putting no limit? Or it has all this externality, meaning sustainability and whatnot, that it's okay to let it shrink and we redeploy those societal resources elsewhere. And I think airline is one of those industries. It's like, growth for its growth sake. It's capital intensive. We know all the problem related to that when it comes down to environment as well. No matter how, well-designed engine, it still need to burn gas, for instance. And out of these situations, do we want to have the bailout money to sustain a industry that we know over the long run is not even good for our planet, or we want to use this as a chance to redeploy our societal resources elsewhere that desperately need? In short, is that where do you do the subsidy? I think that's a societal question. And what I find interesting is no one is talking about where the subsidy should go given the current situation. More like we leave it in the hand of industry lobbyists and the outcome becomes much less purpose-driven and intentional.
Got it. Final question. I'm curious about your personal transformation after this period. What will you change of your career, of your business? How will you reinvent yourself? How will you adapt? Will you at all? I mean, what did you decide in this period?
Yeah, one thing that I really learned is over this period of time, like first is, as university professor, we are really, really privileged because not a lot of people could afford to, work from home. That's a big deal. Like the fact that we could work from home and we don't need to worry from paycheck to paycheck is really a privilege. And I felt like, deeply blessed for that opportunity to really think ahead. Personally, what I've been doing is like doing a lot of different style of teaching, whether it's online, even online-wise. We try a lot of different delivery mode, whether you're going into professional studio to, at home and, doing different pedagogy as well. Because right now it's almost a slack period that we don't have a lot of client because of travel restriction. It is time to get busy on stuff of preparing for future. So as much as I write around other industry, is also applying those lessons to myself as well. I think for people who find themselves having a little bit more time, I think, pick a project is always nice, but also, thinking about to pick up a new skill. We talk about AI is going to displace mundane work and Excel spreadsheet, all those routine work. It's going to get automated. That will continue to stay with us. So given the COVID-19, if for those who are fortunate enough not to need to worry about the immediate economic hardship and rather having a little bit of slack of time, picking up a new skill is absolutely critical. Doesn't mean that you all turn into software programmers. I'm picking up French, for instance, because for the amount of time I was in Switzerland, I haven't really picked up French yet. And I need to, because my permit is up. I need to do that. And I've been putting it off. So there are stuff that are important to your own well-being, but in the past, you're just so burnt out. The millennial generation are so burnt out. Now you probably are less burnt out. Use those moments, do what is important and do what matters. I think if you could do that to yourself, that's already a godsend.
I like it. I like it. Pick a new skill. The new skill that I'm gonna pick is hairstylist or hairdresser. You know,
Right.
I have to go in an extreme, far from me sector. Howard, fantastic. Howard, how are you? Thank you so much. It was a great chat, really inspiring, and well, we keep in touch. Good luck for everything.
Great to be here. Thank you, Michael. Bye bye.